songs from door to door keeps me going. And when I feel the hands of time in my mentor's early rhymes, gets me thinking. All those songs that we have sung, branches reaching for the sun, shall be on my tongue. There ain't no substitute. I'm just tripping on my roots. There ain't no substitute. I'm just tripping on my roots. I'm Jesse Colin Young, and this is Trippin' on My Roots. Today's guest is Steve Miller. Steve and I came up in the rock world together in the 60s, and in the fall of 2019, I asked him to join me on a re-recording of Get Together to celebrate the song's 50th anniversary. We sat down together and talked about how that came about.
Well, Jesse has become a really good friend. We've run into each other in New York, and we
played together in Hawaii.
We got to
when Norton was still alive.
Yep, we got to spend time together, and the last time we got together, what was it? You were in New York. What were we doing? I can't remember. But anyway, we ended up having dinner, and then we ended up coming to my house and hanging out, and we just renewed our friendship. And then as soon as I heard his band, I just really started paying a lot of attention, and we'd email back and forth, and I loved the new work. And he came when you came over to my house. Mm-hmm. You sang some of your new songs, and I was knocked out. I just thought, man, this is so great. It was really inspiring. And so I wouldn't, I just kept hanging on and nagging him and go, what are you doing? When are you coming to the city? When are you going to be? When are you going to be?
We cut the track in Nashville for Get Together when the band was still together.
Yeah.
And I think 6 months later, when I was with you, I said, you want to sing on Get Together? And he said, I'm in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt.
So we did just that. We had a great time recording Get Together. And at the end of the episode, you'll hear this special version of the song, benefiting Why Hunger. But first, Steve and I sat down together and reminisced about old times in Greenwich Village, all the way back to playing shows at the Cafe A Go-Go.
Yeah, this would be 1968.
Yeah, so.
And Blood, Sweat, and Tears was being formed there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, we played there on the way out of the country when we went to make our first album in London at Olympic Studios in '67. We played there. And then when we came back, we played, we dropped in again. And that was, it was really a fun place.
Howard Solomon still?
Yeah. And it was really cool. I was really knocked out, with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, with that band. I thought, wow, what a great idea that was, So it was really important part of the scene for us to play at the Cafe Go-Go, and had to get a cabaret card, and there was all that New York City union bad boy musician penalty stuff you had to pay for being a musician. The trouble with you people, is you need to buy a card, and we were going to watch you real closely.
So I think it was 65 for me.
Wow.
Yeah. And the Blues Project was...
Yeah, Danny Calvin.
Yep.
Yeah.
and Al Cooper.
Yeah. Well, Al was he put Blood, Sweat, and Tears together.
Yeah.
The first time I played in New York, it was 1965, and I played at the phone booth where the Rascals played.
Yeah.
And the Young Rascals were just winding up, and Barry Goldberg and I had this band called the Goldberg Miller Blues Band, and we were on Hullabaloo with the Supremes and the Four Tops, 1965. You were in town doing some stuff. Dylan was around, the Lovin' Spoonful were around, and we were playing in New York City at the phone booth, which was this hilarious kind of mafia society nightclub. And I mean, the things they did to people. I remember New Year's Eve at the phone booth. All of a sudden, all the tables were removed, and they brought in these tables that were like this wide. They were like maybe 14 inches wide, and they just filled the place with tables. And then they had plates that were like this big, and they'd been selling this special New Year's Eve package drink, turkey dinner, all the fixins and everything. And the shows started at 6 o'clock at night or something and lasted 45 minutes. And you know, we didn't know, you know. So we go and play the first set. And I mean, we played like 30 minutes, and they turned on all the lights, and they threw everybody out, and the crowd was like, you know, some guy wanted to beat me up, you know. And they had a bouncer who looked like Cesar Romero in a tuxedo. It was the difference between the Chicago Mafia and the New York Mafia was definitely the New York guys were a lot classier, and the Caesar, like in Chicago, they'd break your thighs with a baseball bat. I worked at a lot of Mafia nightclubs in Chicago, of course. And the New York clubs, they'd just come over and like grab you like this, and you'd pass out. I saw them just like put this. They just took guys.
So for
out.
me, it was the Go-Go.
Yeah.
And
The Go-Go.
it's funny, we're 2 blocks from my house, where I lived on Houston Street. And we were there opening for 9 months with whoever was there, and we kind of traded off with the Blues Project, but we got to rehearse
Oh well, yeah.
on the stage.
It was a great thing if you had a gig, and a piano probably.
It was wonderful. Well, Banana was using the Wurlitzer. But, so one day, I walked over there on a Sunday afternoon, and I was thinking, it's going to be dark. I'm going to call up the guys, and we're going to rehearse. So I walked down the stairs. You know, it was two flights. 2-flight basement.
It's down
It was
there.
really down there.
Yeah.
And I heard some music. I said, shit. But I got another half of the way down, and Buzzy Linhart was on stage.
Yeah.
I had seen him playing vibes with Tim Hardin at the Night Owl back in '65, but I didn't know he was a singer.
Yeah.
And he was singing "Get Together." And my jaw dropped open,
Yeah.
and I stood there, and I felt my life change.
What's that kind of song?
Yes, these doors like swung open, and there was a big arrow that was blinking and said,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I ran-
That's so great that you were receptive to that, you know, and your recording of it, you know, the Youngbloods. I mean, you guys were one of my favorite bands in San Francisco. We did play some gigs together, and I remember you guys were way ahead of us. You had all these classy houses out in San Rafael or Ross, California, or something. There was some.
Yeah, Banana lives in Ross.
Yeah. And you know, Banana, when he opened up the music store, I got my synth from Banana, and that ended up in the Met at the Play It Loud show last April.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I went over and I said to Banana, I said, listen, man, I need a synth, and it needs to be the dumbest, simplest one no keyboard player would ever want. I said, I want it to have a wind button on it. I want it to have an oboe button. And he sold me this little Roland synth 2000 for, I think it was $180, and everything on Fly Like an Eagle I did with that synth through an Echoplex. and you know, I didn't want like my keyboard guys. they were just too finicky. They could never duplicate the same sound. They were always like, everything they did sounded like a carburetor being tuned underwater or something, And so Banana straightened me all out, man. And I took that thing home that day and did the intro to Fly Like an Eagle.
Steve then asked me what drove me out of New York City. We both ended up living in San Francisco, so it was fun remembering those days together.
Well, I grew up here, and after 6 years on the Lower East Side, I don't know, they sent us to play in San Francisco on June 15th, 1967. And I walked into this cheap motel room there on Geary Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned on the little radio.
I know that motel, yeah.
Across from Tommy's joint.
Yeah, Tommy's joint, yeah.
I turned on a little radio, and Get Together was on the radio. And
but hey,
we didn't know this.
Yeah.
And and then we've been playing, at the Go-Go to 40 people, and we went down to
Exactly.
So
that's the real point.
Avalon.
Yeah.
And there were 300 or 400 people there, and they loved us, and they were all going like this.
Yeah, it was so great. It was so great to get out of nightclubs and away from the mafia. And I mean, like where I was playing, the police were on the take, the mafia was on the take, the nightclub owners were all gangsters, and you'd go out to California and you could make like $500 in a night instead of, in a month. And the Family Dog and the Fillmore and the Straight Theater and all this stuff. And you guys, I thought you guys had been there forever. I showed up in 67. And I mean, you guys were just so in the center of the scene, and you were playing all the festivals. You were everywhere.
That was Get Together.
Yeah,
because it was a hit that year, but only in San Francisco and Seattle.
Well, they were ahead of the times, But you guys were a great band. You were my very favorite bands. Jesse's always been relevant, and the band that he had was a great band. It was one of the best bands in San Francisco, and so it's surprising because nobody thought that we would be, no one thought that they could have a career that lasted longer than maybe 4 or 5 year max, or something like that. And when we started, I mean, when I started having hits and everything, the next thing I did was I did every gig there was that was offered to me until I played a gig where there were 40,000 people, and I was angry because there were only 40,000 people there instead of 70. And I remember walking off the stage going, I don't care if I ever do this again in my life. Kind of, but we just worked ourselves to death, But I always wanted to do this all my life. And when I was little, Les Paul was my godfather, and I got to see Les Paul play a lot of music in the 40s, in Milwaukee before. Mm-hmm. And he and Les and Mary were married at our house, had their honeymoon at our house, and then went on to New York to do their radio show and their TV show. So I saw Les, and Les was like miles ahead of everybody. He was like inventing stuff. He had a television show. He'd had like 20 hits. He had a real career. It just went on and on and on. So I started thinking like that, And then I started looking at people like Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, and I was kind of going like, I thought Boz and I can be Bing and Bob, like you and I are now.
Okay.
Bing and Bob. And I thought, but they're around forever. They're still working. They still do what they want to do. So I always wanted to be a musician. I always wanted to make records, and when I got to make records, that was the biggest thrill of my life. It was like the studio became an instrument in itself, and I really, loved it. And as time went on, I still didn't know until, I was in my 40s that it could really, really, really just run,
Right.
And really when it did was like after, I think 1982, 83, I sort of felt like, people were going like, why don't these dinosaur rock bands leave? And it was all Johnny Rotten and punk music, and they were really just trying to kick us off the stage. So I went from playing football stadiums to kind of going like, I think I'll retire. And and I bought a boat and I went up to Seattle and I started doing the Inside Passage, and I did that for 6 years. Just had this great time. And then all of a sudden, everybody was real tired of punk music, and classic rock radio was back. And I had this album that had been in the chart for 5 years that I didn't even think about. And boom, I went back out to tour. And next thing I knew, I was playing in sheds again, sold out sheds.
I tried to avoid it.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's because
you were smart. You got your...
My dad... my dad went to Harvard, and the only musician we had in the family was a drunk piano player. He was a third cousin, so they were looking at me like, music is fun, and it's great.
He probably made him get a cabaret card just to come to Thanksgiving dinner.
No.
That drunk cousin of yours.
No, but he was,
yeah, I know.
it's funny. He was always, my dad was always there, even though when I got kicked out of prep school for playing the guitar, and he had to come get me and all my shit.
You got kicked out of prep school.
It's my senior year, 2 months before graduation.
Oh!
For playing the guitar at the wrong time.
Ow! Wow, that's horrible.
And then, yeah.
I got kicked out of prep school
when I
too.
came home from Ohio State one summer and said, Dad, could I study the blues this summer and not get a job washing dishes? And that was a real stretch for him, but he let me. I mean, without whining or saying, what are you, crazy?
This is really funny. I had no idea. I didn't know any of this. Like, I got kicked out of prep school at the end of my junior year. I've since been made a distinguished alumni of that prep school. They've welcomed me back with open arms. But I had a meeting. I went to the University of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So I'm having this meeting with my parents, mom and dad. My dad was a doctor. He was a pathologist. Right. And they're going, well, Steve, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? They're looking at, it's like 4 years and I'm like 12 credits short, I've been playing in a band the whole time. And I looked at my parents and I said, well, I want to go to Chicago and play blues, which is, I want to go to Chicago and work in a mafia nightclub with gangsters. And my father, I always say, if he had had a 2x4, he would have hit me with it. He would have given me a big pop. And my mom looked at me and she said, you know what? She said, you're just 20 years old and, you don't have any real heavy responsibility. She said, why don't you go see if you can make it? Here's $100. Leave tomorrow. She gave me $100, the green card, and whoop, I was gone. And never looked back.
It had been a long, long day of recording, so eventually we had to call it a night.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to do anything with you, man. And just to be a little part of this really means a lot to me. So thank you.
It's wonderful, man. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Great.
I loved it.
Me too.
Love is but a song we sing, fear's the way we die. you hear the song we sing, you will understand. Listen. We hold the key to love and fear, all in our trembling hand. Just one key unlocks them both. It's there at your command. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. I say, come on, people now, smile on each other. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now, right now, right now. Come on, people now.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Trippin' on My Roots. Follow us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to listen to the latest episodes. I'm Jesse Colin Young. Keep on trippin', y'all.